Niki Lauda is remembered as the fearless Formula One champion who survived a fiery crash, came back to win world titles, and even built his own airline empire. But here's the contradiction. While the world saw the legend on the racetrack, few know the man at home, a father of 5, whose children grew up in the shadow of both triumph and tragedy. So, whatever happened to Niki Lauda's kids? Niki Lauda's story was never just about speed, it was about defiance. Born in Vienna in 1949 into a wealthy industrial family, his relatives expected him to follow a safe business career. But Niki had other ideas. Against his family's wishes, he took out a bank loan to finance his racing dream. Years later, he recalled bluntly, "My family told me I was an idiot. Maybe I was, but I had no other choice." By 1974, Lauda was behind the wheel for Ferrari, and just 1 year later he won his first Formula One World Championship. For Ferrari fans, he was the savior, the man who ended their long drought. Calm, precise, almost machine-like in his style, he quickly earned the nickname the Computer. But it was 1976 that would define him forever. Locked in a fierce title fight with British rival James Hunt, Lauda suffered his infamous crash at the Nürburgring. His Ferrari burst into flames and he was trapped in the wreck for nearly a minute. Pulled out by fellow drivers, his face and lungs were burned so badly that a priest was called to give him last rites. Yet, in what became one of the most astonishing comebacks in sports history, Lauda returned to the cockpit just 6 weeks later. His wounds were still raw, his bandages still visible, but he finished 4th in the Italian Grand Prix. When asked why, Lauda said simply, "I had to prove to myself I could do it." He lost the 1976 championship to Hunt by a single point, but the following year came back to claim his second world title. After briefly stepping away from the sport, Lauda returned in the 1980s with McLaren. In 1984, he won his third and final championship, beating his teammate Alain Prost by just half a point. Still the closest title margin in Formula One history. Beyond the racetrack, Lauda built an empire in aviation, founding Lauda Air and later Nikki Airlines. But even there, he faced tragedy. In 1991, Lauda Air Flight 004 crashed in Thailand, killing 223 people. Instead of retreating, Lauda personally investigated the accident, taking on Boeing until the company admitted a design fault. That mix of bluntness, courage, and obsession with truth defined him both in and out of the cockpit. And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. Lauda was never afraid of controversy. In 1976, he withdrew from the rain-soaked Japanese Grand Prix, saying the conditions were too dangerous. Many accused him of cowardice, but Lauda didn't care. "My life is worth more than a title," he insisted. Later in life, he mocked modern drivers for complaining too much, calling them crybabies compared to his era. Even in retirement, Lauda's impact on Formula One was enormous. As non-executive chairman of Mercedes, he was the man who convinced Lewis Hamilton to join the team, a decision that would lead to one of the most dominant dynasties the sport has ever seen. Hamilton himself said, "Without Niki, I wouldn't be here. He believed in me when others doubted." Over his lifetime, Lauda was celebrated not just as a 3-time world champion, but as a legend of resilience. He was inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, honored with the Laureus Lifetime Achievement Award, and consistently ranked among the greatest drivers of all time. Yet if you asked him, he'd downplay the glory. "From success, you learn nothing. From failure, you learn everything," he often said. And those words, forged in fire, pain, and triumph, became the lesson he tried to pass on to his children. Away from the roar of engines and the glare of cameras, Niki Lauda's personal life was just as eventful as his career. In the mid-1970s, at the height of his Ferrari fame, he met Marlene Naus, a glamorous former model who was a fixture in Vienna's social scene. The two quickly became one of the most talked-about couples in European high society. In 1976, the same year as his infamous Nürburgring crash, they married. Together they had two sons, Lucas, born in 1979, and Mathias, born in 1981. But Lauda's marriage to Marlene wasn't without turbulence. In 1982, while still married, Nikki fathered another son, Christoph, from an affair. For years, Christoph was kept out of the public spotlight. Lauda later admitted with brutal honesty, "I was not a full father to him. That is something I regret." After 15 years together, Nikki and Marlene divorced in 1991, though she remained a respected figure in his life. More than a decade later, Lauda's second great love story began in the unlikeliest of places, on one of his airplanes. In 2005, he was flying with his own airline when he met Birgit Wetzinger, a flight attendant 29 years younger than him. Their bond proved extraordinary. Later that year, when Lauda's health collapsed due to kidney failure, Birgit donated one of her own kidneys to save his life. He would often joke, "She didn't just give me love, she gave me a spare part." The two married in 2008, and in 2009 they welcomed twins, Mia and Max. Lauda, then 60 years old, became a father again late in life. Friends noted that with Birgit and the twins he seemed calmer, more reflective, almost softened compared to the fiery and uncompromising man the public knew from racing. This was the private side of Niki Lauda, the husband and father sometimes absent due to his relentless career, sometimes flawed, but always deeply tied to his family. For all his fame and success, Niki Lauda's most complicated and tender role was the one far from the racetrack, that of a father. His 5 children grew up in a family shaped by both triumph and turbulence, with a father who was often absent, sometimes stern, but always unforgettable. The first to arrive was Lucas Lauda, born in 1979. Lucas didn't inherit his father's obsession with racing. Instead, he preferred a quieter, more private life. He often acted as the glue in the family, managing the career of his younger brother Mathias and supporting him from the sidelines. Friends and insiders describe Lucas as steady, dependable, and the opposite of the fiery, outspoken Nikki. While Nikki's life was spent chasing championships and running businesses, Lucas chose stability, showing that sometimes the greatest way to carry a famous name is not to chase the spotlight, but to steady it. 2 years later came Mathias Lauda, born in 1981. From an early age, it was clear he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. He threw himself into racing, working his way up through Formula 3000, GP2, and eventually the DTM touring car series. Mathias also raced endurance cars, and in 2017, he achieved his proudest moment, winning the FYA World Endurance Championship, LMGTEM, with Aston Martin. But life as the son of Niki Lauda wasn't always easy. Mathias later reflected, "For the world, he was a legend. For me, he was Papa. He was my hero, my role model, my everything. When Nikki was home, which wasn't often, he made those moments count." Mathias recalled, "We'd get up early, make a big breakfast together, and he always talked to us like adults. He explained women, sex, motorsport, everything. He never sugar-coated life." Nikki's philosophy as a father was the same as his philosophy as a racer: blunt, practical, and honest. He wasn't the type for bedtime stories or soft words, but he taught his sons how the world worked, straight to the point. During his marriage to Marlene Naus, Nikki also fathered a third child, Christoph, born in 1982, from an extramarital relationship. For years, Christoph lived away from the media spotlight, and his relationship with Nikki was complicated. With rare candor, Lauda admitted, "I was not a full father to him. That is something I regret." Yet Christoph was legally acknowledged and included in Nikki's will. When Nikki died in 2019, Christoph quietly attended the funeral, though he was not part of the public family statements. His presence was a reminder of the hidden chapters in Lauda's personal life, the shadows that existed behind the legend. And then, much later, came the surprise of fatherhood again. In 2009, at the age of 60, Nikki became a father to twins, Mia and Max, born to his second wife, Birgit. By this point, Lauda was older, perhaps calmer, and far more reflective. He had survived multiple health crises, including a kidney transplant, donated by Birgit herself. With the twins, Lauda seemed softened. He doted on them in a way that friends said was different from his earlier fatherhood. Mia and Max were raised in Vienna, attending international schools, and enjoying a normal childhood, away from media attention. Mia, strikingly similar in appearance to her father, and Max, more like Birgit, occasionally tried go-karting, but Birgit has insisted they not be pressured into racing. For them, Nikki wasn't the champion of Ferrari or McLaren or the airline mogul. He was simply Dad, an older father, sometimes tired, often busy, but deeply grateful for a second chance at family life. Inside the Lauda household, whether with Marlene and their boys in the 1980s, or with Birgit and the twins in later years, the atmosphere reflected Nikki's personality, practical, disciplined, but touched with humor. He could be absent-minded at times, buried in business or Formula One politics, but when present, he demanded honesty and gave it back in equal measure. His children learned that from him. No excuses, no sugarcoating, just truth. Together, Lucas, Mathias, Christoph, Mia, and Max each lived different paths. Lucas chose privacy, Mathias embraced racing, Christoph carried the complexities of his father's dual life, and Mia and Max enjoyed the rare luxury of childhood, away from fame. But all of them were shaped by the same force, a father who taught them, in his own uncompromising way, to face life head-on. Fans often wonder if Niki Lauda ever lived to see grandchildren. As of now, none of his children, Lucas, Mathias, or Christoph, have publicly announced having children of their own. For the time being, the Lauda legacy is carried by his 5 children. Whether future generations will continue the name in racing or elsewhere remains to be seen. After his death in May 2019, the world mourned, but behind the scenes, tensions quickly surfaced. Lauda's estate, estimated in the hundreds of millions, thanks to his Formula One career, airline ventures, and investments, became the subject of a bitter dispute. Reports suggested that Birgit, his second wife and mother of his twins, sought around 20 million euros through the Lauda Family Foundation. Meanwhile, Lucas and Mathias, his elder sons, defended their shares, and Christoph, the son from his extramarital affair, was legally recognized in the will as well. The Austrian press called it Lauda's final race, not on asphalt, but in courtrooms and boardrooms. Yet these controversies didn't overshadow how the world remembered him. On May 29, 2019, Vienna held a funeral befitting a national icon. His coffin, draped in flowers and adorned with his red racing helmet, was placed inside St. Stephen's Cathedral, the most famous church in Austria. Thousands of fans lined the streets to say goodbye, while dignitaries, world leaders, and Formula One stars filled the pews. Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Alain Prost, and Toto Wolff were there. Former Austrian presidents and politicians came to honor him. The burial itself was private. After the grand ceremony, Niki Lauda was laid to rest in a cemetery in Vienna, surrounded by close family. His wife Birgit, their twins, his older sons, and even Christoph all came together for that final farewell. In a rare gesture of unity, the fractured branches of his family stood side by side, mourning the man who had been, to the world, a champion, but to them, simply Papa or Nikki. In Austria, his legacy is everywhere. Streets, memorials, and exhibitions honor him as a national hero who brought pride to the country not just once, but across decades. In Formula One, his absence is still felt. Mercedes dedicated its 2019 Constructors' Championship to him, and Lewis Hamilton said tearfully, "Without Nikki, I wouldn't be here. He believed in me when others doubted. He was my mentor, my friend, and I'll carry his spirit forever." In pop culture, his story continues to inspire. The 2013 film Rush immortalized his fiery rivalry with James Hunt. Lauda himself praised the film for its accuracy, saying only half-jokingly, "It was 80% true. The 20% that wasn't true was better than what really happened." And in the minds of fans, his sharp philosophy still resonates. Lines like, "My life is worth more than a title," and "From success, you learn nothing. From failure, you learn everything," are quoted like scripture, not just in racing, but in business, sports, and life. So how is Niki Lauda remembered today? As a man of contradictions, a calculating computer behind the wheel, yet fiercely human when he tore off his bandages and returned to the cockpit. A businessman who built airlines but who personally confronted Boeing after tragedy. A sharp-tongued executive who shaped modern Formula One, but also a flawed, sometimes distant, yet fiercely honest father of five. Lauda's story did not end at the checkered flag. It rests now in Vienna, in the hearts of his family, and in the memory of millions who still see him as proof that resilience can triumph over fire, fear, and fate. Niki Lauda's life was never a straight race from start to finish. It was a story of fire and survival, of victories and controversies, of love and regret. On the track, he was the fearless champion who came back from the flames to win 3 world titles. In business, he was the sharp-eyed entrepreneur who built airlines and challenged Boeing itself. In Formula One's modern era, he was the mentor who shaped Mercedes's dynasty and helped bring Lewis Hamilton to greatness. But away from the spotlight, he was also a husband and a father of 5. His children, Lucas, Mathias, Christoph, Mia, and Max, each carried a different piece of his legacy. Lucas, steady and private. Mathias, the racer who proved the Lauda spirit still runs on the track. Christoph, the quiet reminder of life's complications. And Mia and Max, the twins who gave Nikki a softer second chance at fatherhood. Lauda was not a perfect man. He admitted his flaws, confessed his regrets, and often spoke more bluntly than politely. But that honesty was part of his genius. He faced life the way he faced every corner, directly, without excuses. His children grew up with that same philosophy. No sugarcoating, no illusions, just truth. When he died in 2019, the world mourned, and Austria honored him with a funeral fit for a national hero. His coffin rested in Vienna's St. Stephen's Cathedral, crowned with his red helmet, a symbol of the man who had stared down death and refused to flinch. He now rests in Vienna's soil, but his spirit still runs through Formula One, through his family, and through the millions inspired by his story. Today, Niki Lauda is remembered in many ways as the computer behind the wheel, the survivor who showed what resilience truly means, the businessman unafraid of confrontation, and the father who, in his own flawed but fierce way, left behind a family that carries his name forward. So maybe Lauda's greatest legacy isn't just the 3 championships or the trophies in glass cases. Maybe it's the lesson he gave us all, that failure teaches more than success, that life is worth more than titles, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward anyway. What do you think? Is Niki Lauda's true legacy the victories he won, the family he raised, or the fearless example he left for the world? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives behind the legends.